Today we're going to make nettle pesto. Because it's spring in the Northwest, nettles are going to be one of the first things that come up. So not long ago, my family and I went out and had all of our kids go with us, and we harvested nettles. Directly after harvesting them, we went over to a relative's house and we cleaned and blanched the nettles in order to take out the sting. And then we took them home and froze some of them, and then also dehydrated them, so we dried them. And so that's going to be the combination of nettles that I'm using today. First, I'm going to go ahead and heat up some water, and then once it's boiling, I'm going to take it out and then pour that over the nettles. I'm doing this with a hot water heater for tea, but you can certainly do this on the stove as well. And the hot water is going to go ahead and help the nettles to rehydrate. While that's happening, I'm going to go ahead and take my walnuts. For pesto, you can certainly use pine nuts if you'd like. It was a bad year for pine nuts and I didn't get any from relatives. So this year I'm going to be using walnuts, which is totally fine. I'm going to go ahead and toast them at 250 for about 30 minutes, or at least until I can start smelling them. So definitely pay attention to your nose to help you make sure that they're done. While that's happening, I'm going to go ahead and take my nettles that were frozen, which are now thawed. I'm going to go ahead and start chopping them up. Make sure when you're cutting to use good knife skills, make a claw, pretend you're a bear, and utilize that in order to help make sure that you keep all of your fingers. These cuts don't have to be pretty because they're all going to end up in a blender anyway, but I'm just going to go ahead and chop these smaller just to kind of help that blending process and make sure it gets as finely blended as I'd like. So as you can see, I'm going to go ahead and do this with the garlic, but you can certainly go ahead and put your full cloves of garlic into your food processor or blender, and then use the pulse button to mince it up way smaller, and you can just keep it in there. I'm now also chopping the walnuts for kind of that same purpose of making sure that it's kind of smaller to make sure that it blends a little bit easier. Just a note, we didn't show it in this video, but after you hydrate your nettles with the hot water, I would say go ahead and use a fine mesh strainer or a cheesecloth or something like that, and go ahead and strain out the nettles into that to make sure that you don't have all that water content with your nettles. Once I've done that, I've gone ahead and added my chopped thawed nettles into my rehydrated nettles, and I'm going to put that aside for putting into the blender later on with all of my other ingredients. I'm now adding into the blender the nettles, the minced garlic, as well as the walnuts. To add umami flavor into it, you can go ahead and add in powdered mushrooms, or follow regular pesto recipes and add in Parmesan cheese. Once all that's added into the blender, I'm also going to add a little bit of oil to make sure that it can start going initially. And then I'm going to close it up and start blending. As this begins to blend, I'm going to continuously add some olive oil. This is going to help to what's called emulsify the mixture as it blends. And depending on the amount of ingredients that you have in there, you're going to want to just kind of eyeball it and add some here and there. As you add more in, you'll see that it begins to mix a little bit easier, so that's just something to keep in mind. Make sure to taste as you go. Feel free to add in more garlic if you like it more garlicky, add in more nettles if you feel like it needs more nettles, add in more nuts if you feel like it needs more nuts, or that mushroom powder and or Parmesan cheese if you feel like it needs a little bit more like umami flavor. as well as, salt here if you feel like it needs more salt. Every once in a while, go ahead and scrape down the sides just to make sure that it blends a little bit better. But once it gets to kind of your desired texture and look, feel free to take it out, and then now you have your pesto. Feel free to listen to your favorite podcast or music while you are blending this up. I personally am listening to the GG podcast from the Aquasasani community. Shout out to the GG podcast folks.